She said, I've decided to become a follower of Jesus Christ. And I thought, oh no. For an atheist, this is the worst possible news, you know. Thought she was going to turn into some holy roller or something. I mean, I didn't. First word that went through my mind, divorce.
What up, heathens? And yes, we're doing part 2 of Lee Strobel's descent into Christianity, I guess. If you don't remember last time, we left off with him saying that he first thought of leaving his wife because she turned Christian. And yeah, I think that's a pretty shitty reason to leave your wife. You're basically just an asshole there, Lee. I mean, assholes exist in Christianity just like they exist in just about any religion because it's not specific to a religion. I mean, you can be an asshole and be the best Christian on earth. They're mutually exclusive. Actually, if you could argue in some respects that Christians are assholes. Well, their dogma makes them an asshole, maybe, or maybe just the dogma themselves itself is an asshole-ish kind of dogma. Now, let's continue with Lee.
But I stuck around, and what shocked me is in the following months, I began to see very positive changes in her character and her values and the way she related to me and the kids. And it was winsome, and it was attractive. And so finally, one Sunday morning, I'm sleeping off a hangover. She's getting ready to go to church.
So you started noticing that your wife began to better herself because she became Christian. Well, I would say that you don't have to be a Christian in order to better yourself. I mean, you can be a better person without some kind of higher power working above you in your life. What I would call this is an appeal to emotion, or possibly just more anecdotal evidence. Because just because you bettered your life by believing in this dogma doesn't mean that it's going to be good for somebody else to do it. I mean, you do realize, Lee, that there are plenty of people that use Christianity in order to sexually abuse kids. They use it in order to abuse their wives, abuse their kids. And so you can't say that just because she started believing God that she's a better person because of it. She made that decision to become a better person, and you need to empower her and her ability to make herself a better person, not be like, oh, because you got God in your life now, you're a better person. That's just bullshit, and it's illogical as fuck.
I mean, she says, why don't you come to church with me today? And I thought, you know what, I'm gonna go, get her out of this cult that she's involved in, so I went with her to a church. It was a meeting in a movie theater about a mile from my house. And the pastor gets up to preach. And he was a young guy. I don't even think he was shaven yet. His name was Bill Hybels. And he gave a talk called Basic Christianity. And I remember sitting there as a skeptic, and it was like one after the other, he was just knocking down my misconceptions about Christianity. And I remember walking out that day saying 2 things. Number 1, I was still an atheist. He didn't convince me that day that God exists. But number 2, I realized if this stuff is true, this has huge implications for my life. Duh. So I decided that day, take my journalism training, take my legal training, and systematically investigate, is there any credibility to Christianity or any other world religion?
Well, Lee, I'm glad that you went to that church, even though I don't believe your bullshit story in general. I believe that it's made up. I believe you made it up in order to sell books, in order to become popular, maybe. I think that you made your whole story up here because, as we covered last week in the part 1 of your debunk here, you use a lot of Christian arguments in order to say that you were an atheist. A lot of Christian stereotypes of atheists, like atheists just live for pleasure, and atheists are just a bunch of assholes. All that kind of stuff. You do preface it with saying that not all atheists are like this, but you're putting off the persona of, hey, this is what I did, and this is possibly what's going to happen to you, so you might not want to do it because you might not want to be an atheist because you might be an asshole, you might be a drunkard, you might be this douchebag that wants to divorce his wife over just a petty squabble over beliefs. That's a slippery slope argument there. I didn't cover that in the last video, but I'm just now realizing that that's a slippery slope that you're presenting. Don't do these things because if you do these things when you become an atheist, then you're going to be a bad person. Therefore, you shouldn't be an atheist. you should believe in God. That is a clear-cut case of slippery slope. But I'm glad that you went and you investigated. Although, he knocked down preconceptions that you had about Christianity, which seems to tell me that you've never really considered, religion or considered Christians or anything like that. As far as when you're interacting with people. I mean, I consider that people are Christians all the time. That's called being a considerate motherfucker. Something you would know nothing about. And yes, if the Christian claims are indeed true and they matter, they of course have impacts on our life. And we need to know whether or not these claims are true. But you know what? The Bible is a test procedure for God. And he fails at almost every turn. I'm sorry, but if I was handed a test procedure that had contradictions in it, so many contradictions that I didn't know what the fucking test for, I think that I would throw the test back at him and be like, fuck you and your test, man.
And I launched on what turned out to be a nearly 2-year investigation of the evidence. Now, as I began that investigation, one thing was very clear very quickly. And that is, if you want to get to the bottom line, is Christianity true, and therefore every other contrary faith system in the world false? If you want to get to that bottom line, all you have to do is answer one question. Did Jesus or did he not return from the dead?
Oh, God, Alex, I don't know what to pick here. I think I'm going to go with, what is bullshit Christian dogma? Okay, look, supposedly Jesus died and then he rose from the dead, right? Well, see, the problem with this is fucking contradictions again. In all 4 Gospels, all 4 of them have different versions of how Jesus rose from the dead. Like, just that one minute detail, that he says is what Christianity hinges upon, right? Okay, for one thing, of course, medical science is going to say, fuck you, he didn't raise from the dead. Okay. Number 2, the mythicist in me says that if he did in fact raise from the dead and the tomb was found empty, then the Roman police force, if you want to call them that at the time, would have rounded up all of his brocephs and they would have killed them. Bless me. Because they would have suspected them of stealing the body, not of Jesus raising himself from the dead. That's not the first thought that would have come to their mind. They would have been like, they stole the body, so let's go kill all these motherfuckers for stealing the body and making us think that he's all walking around and shit. Not to mention the fact that he was walking around and people were seeing him. And if you don't remember, the entire community that was out to see him crucified, to make the judgment to let that one Barabbas dude go and crucify his ass. Okay? That is, the entire city turned out for that. So everybody knows what Jesus looks like. Plus, if you see a guy walking around who's supposedly dead and he's got all these holes in his hands and his feet and shit, aren't you gonna think, this motherfucker was crucified. Where the fuck did he come from? So, no. I'm going to take, for $500, Jesus did not raise from the dead due to illogical historical thought and medical science saying that it's bullshit to raise someone from the dead.
That's the ball game. Why? Because in a variety of different ways, directly and indirectly, Jesus made transcendent and messianic and divine claims about himself. He claimed to be the Son of God. At one point, he got up before a group and he said, I and the Father are one. And the word in Greek there for one is not masculine, it's neuter. Which means Jesus was not saying, I and the Father are the same person. He was saying, I and the Father are the same thing. We're one in nature. We're one in essence. And how did the audience understand what he was saying? They picked up stones to kill him because they said, you, a mere man, you're claiming to be God.
Well, holy fuck, Lee, I am so glad that you have come here in order to analyze that little bit of evidence and say, oh, hey, look, it's the neutered version of it. So, we're saying that we're the one thing. We're nature. We're everything. I mean, me and God are one. That's not. I'm so glad that you come to tell us that, Lee. I mean, it's taken so long for us to know that, but holy shit, man, you don't understand like how much Christian teaching you're going against at this point. I mean, it's literally been taught that Jesus and God are one and the same person. That God bestowed himself upon Mary, raped her, got her pregnant, and then had himself, and everything. So, in the Christian dogma, you have the three gods, sort of. I mean, you got God, Yahweh, and then you got the Holy Spirit, and then you got Jesus. They're all God, apparently. I don't understand how that works, but apparently you're saying that they're all one in nature. I find it hard to believe that when I kick a tree in the face, it's God. I mean, I don't see me kicking a tree as being, I'm kicking God. If that were it, you'd just see a whole bunch of atheists out there just fucking kicking trees and destroying lawns and shit. Yeah, I guess we would be the crazy ones then. We definitely would look crazy, but, I think that you're making this up because people have pointed out how it's ridiculous to think that God fathered himself and everything, and then he died. But it's just a new apologetic that you're using here. You're trying to reinterpret it. Now, Lee, okay, I looked up the original Greek, okay, and so you make a couple of non sequitur jumps to some statements that you need to prove first. Like, for one, you would need to prove that it needs to be gender specific. Like, how do we know that it needs to be gender specific in order to know that he means that God and him are one? Like, if God and him are one, I mean, God isn't of any kind of gender, right? I mean, I don't think God has a specified gender. I mean, he's like a non-gendered thing, right? He exists outside of space, time, whatever. He doesn't have a gender, okay? It's always referenced to him as being like a man, but I'm fairly certain that that's because of the fact that it was, patriarchal society. Both of them are one in that they are one thing, but that clearly states right there that they are one and the same. Like, not just one and the same as in nature. That's the other jump that you make there, is that it's a non sequitur to go from, he just means a general one thing that's not gendered, which it doesn't have to be gendered because God isn't gendered, at least not in the Christian dogma. And then you make the other jump to say that one thing is nature, like God is nature. If you're going to say that God is nature, basically we can't tell whether or not God exists by the Christian dogma if God is equal to nature. Because if God is equal to nature, then what the fuck are you praying to? You're saying don't make idols, and you persecute all these pagans in the past because they're praying to nature. But it's like, you're not praying to God in my way. I mean, do you understand how much death has occurred in Christianity alone amongst itself over how to worship this God? But no, you've come here with the perfect explanation with no logical line of thought to lead you to think that God is nature.
Claim to be the Son of God, but so what? I could claim to be the Son of God. Drew could claim to be the Son of God. Anybody could claim to be the Son of God. But if Jesus claimed to be the Son of God, died, and then 3 days later rose from the dead, that's pretty good evidence he's telling the truth, right?
I would say yes, it is very good evidence to prove that he was some kind of magical being, that maybe he wasn't human exactly. That's kind of a far-fetched to say, hey, I am God, or or me and God are one, or any of his claims to be the Son of God. First, you got to prove that God exists, of course, and this is assuming that you've already proven that Jesus definitely existed, and he existed as he exists in the Bible, which is patently false. So, I mean, normally, we wouldn't be able to get past that point in a conversation, but I'm going to give you that, okay? I'm going to give you up until the resurrection. Okay, but just because the motherfucker resurrected doesn't mean that he is the Son of God. I mean, you have to be able to tie him to this definition of God. Like you would have to have some kind of, there's a magical bubble in the middle of evidence to connect Jesus to God. I mean, just like you said right there, I mean, anybody can claim to be the Son of God, but then you make this large leap to saying that if he rose from the dead, then yes, he was God. I mean, that's this whole section here is just full of non sequitur logic, because it doesn't make sense. How can you make that leap to saying that, oh yes, that definitely proves that Jesus was the Son of God? Okay, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, we have this test manual for God, which he fails in and of itself, but I mean, he doesn't, I don't see where you're going with this. I don't see the logical connection between the two. I think that you need more evidence in order to state that. I don't think that just because Jesus resurrected, it doesn't mean that he is the Son of God. It means that he claimed to be the Son of God, and he wants to be the Son of God, but just because he resurrected does not internally mean that he is the Son of God. I mean, for all you fucking know, he could be some kind of humanoid alien that came down, and he doesn't die like normal fucking people. He's an alien, you dipshit. There's a lot of explanation. So I would say that in order for it to make sense, to distinguish Jesus from any other explanation, you would need to have that little bit above a bubble that connects Jesus to God in that respect. Thank you for joining me today on this Fallacy Friday. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you will join us next week. Go down below, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss it, and hit the like button if you like this video. I will see you guys later, and y'all have a great new year.